Hello world, this is Zan, presenting a tier list for Age of Wonders 4, their society traits. Specifically, this is going to be on the release version. And before I start, I do want to preface that by default, these are going to be my opinions on what I think is strong or weak, and you're very welcome to add in the comments below, tell me if you disagree, if you agree, if you like the format, or if you found some really cool ideas that maybe I just didn't know about yet. The second thing I do want to mention is I don't enjoy or like the traditional S, A, B, C, and so on tier lists. I tend to be a little bit more lenient to what abilities are trying to do, especially in a game like this that, although these are very, or can be very powerful, I don't think they are the be-all end-all choice in your nation. So how I actually do this is I do a great, good, and weak scale. And what that means, at least in my terms, in my strategic sense, is a great trait in this game is something that is good all the time. 100% of the time. It is good at the beginning, the middle, the end. If it's not good in all stages, it is so good in its specific stage. Say some early game buff is so powerful that it's going to grant you such a lead, it doesn't have to be good later. Or a late game buff is so game ending in your favor that it's okay that you have nothing early. So just something that is consistently good, I will consider great. Something I will consider good is something that might be consistently good, but not game-changing, not overly powerful. Or I also bundle these together, something that is situationally very strong, but getting into that situation is not something that you'll be able to consistently find or do. And then something that is weak is something that it can be consistent, it can be situational, but overall the bonus that it gives you, I don't feel is impactful enough compared to the alternatives. So going forward, I hope that explains the following system I'll present to you. Probably cut that part. So to start, cut that part. Let's start now with the order traits. And you'll notice I'm missing a few traits from the unlocks. It's okay, we'll double back and grab those. Starting with Chosen Uniters, we have a 20% income from vassals, a 10 in good alignment, shield and polearm units get a +1 rank, you start with an extra shield or polearm unit, and you also start with diplomatic focus. And what that does, that diplomatic focus is actually one of those Imperium traits that you can do, where you purchase a Whispering Stone. I can move over to it. So this has I see this kind of as you have an early Focusing Stone or Whispering Stone, which is going to allow your capital city to get a little bit more stability when you place it in there. But more importantly, it's going to save you the 75 to 100 Imperium that this diplomatic or this general empire skill would otherwise cost you. Overall, I see Chosen Uniters as a stereotypical great trait. This is because in the early game, it's going to give you a bonus to the rank of your shield and polearm units, improving their combat efficiency. And it's going to give you a starting additional unit, saving you some gold and giving you a little bit more early power, giving you tempo. And then on top of that, it saves you some Imperium from having to take diplomatic focus. Obviously, there's a chance that you don't really do a diplomatic game, but Whispering Stones are always useful because of the stability of your cities. Then finally, as the game goes late, 20% income from vassals can actually be pretty strong. So that ends up being very powerful early game to give you some tempo. Maybe it's not as powerful in the mid game, but it's still there. You're still riding off of your early lead and just starting to benefit off of your 20% income from vassals. Let's move on now to Devotees of Good. So the Devotees of Good, your cities will all gain 10 stability, And your Empire is going to gain 5 Imperium per level of good alignment. You will also start with 10 good alignment. Your support units and polearm units have +1 rank, and you start with an extra support or polearm unit. This one, I don't think I actually want to place it in the great category. Because although it is consistent, these bonuses are somewhat consistent, they are not too strong, but that consistency is enough to make it a good take. 10 stability can help you reach another tier of city happiness that you otherwise wouldn't get. And these levels are going to give you a bonus or a penalty if they're low to your actual income. So that 10 stability can actually help you out a good bit. The 5 Imperium per level of good alignment, there are only 3 sets of alignment above neutral. So potentially you have about 15 extra Imperium, which is good. Anything that gives you Imperium is going to be good, but realistically, you're likely to just get 5 or 10 Imperium for the majority of the game. Maybe majority is a strong word, but for a lot of the game, you'll just have 5 to 10 Imperium level. However, it also gives you an early boost. You start with an extra support or polearm unit, depending on what culture you have. That can be good or bad, depending on how good those units are. So overall, I think Devotees of Good is a good trait, because it is very consistently good, but I don't think it's strong enough to be great. We'll move on now to Imperialists. Imperialists, however, you're going to start with your throne city. And keep in mind, your throne city can be changed. It is not necessarily going to be the capital from the start to the end of the game. You can move it. But regardless, the throne city and cities that share a border with it will gain 20 stability and 20 gold income, in addition to your capital starting with 1 additional population. I personally think this one should go into the weak category. Although the benefits are nice, it is a decent starting boost. It is going to give your primary city 20 stability. Maybe if you hook it up here with Devotees of Good, you're going to start with an extra, 5%? You'll start in stable, so you'll have an extra 5%, and you're very, very close to being orderly and getting 10% to your incomes. The 20 gold income can fund, let's say, 3 tier 1 units. And starting with 1 population usually is good. But in this game, I don't think these early bonuses, that don't scale too well, mind you, in my personal opinion, and I tend to only run 3 to 4 cities that do tend to board the primary city, but I don't think that these incomes are too impactful. They're not... For something that falls off later, I don't think this provides you the early game boost that it is trying to do. That +1 population is very weak because early on, and again, in my opinion, I tend to spend my Imperium points on an extra population, and that first, second, and third population that you buy with Imperium are very, very cheap. So overall, this bonus is not consistent because it's only good at the beginning of the game and is not very strong even then. So I think this is a stereotypical weak trait. Let's move on now to Prolific Swarmers. And once again, I think we have a great trait, because your city growth requiring less food across almost any 4X game, that tends to be a very powerful bonus. Tier 1 units have a +1 rank. Depending on your playstyle, that can be an early game boost or an entire game boost. Just depends on how you want to play the game. Non-magic origin units, so recruitable units, not those that you summon. Although I think there might be some that are magic origin but summoned. That's okay. Regardless, a sizable portion of your army for the entire game are going to pay 20% less upkeep. That is pretty significant. So far these bonuses are applicable, two-thirds of them are applicable the entire game. 1/3 of them, although applicable for the entire game, is primarily centered around the beginning of the game. Again, unless you have your tier 1 spam style. And then on top of all of these bonuses, you start with an extra tier 1 unit. This is fantastic. So this is going to give you an early boost and then transition to assisting you throughout the entire game. Yeah, this is definitely a great tier set. Let's move down now to Ritual Cannibals. So Ritual Cannibals gets you the corpse eating ability, which let me try and show it. So you destroy a corpse and heal 15 temporary hit points. It doesn't cost you an action, but it has a 1-turn cooldown. It gives you a -10 to your alignment and prevents you from taking Chosen Uniters and Devotees of Good. The nearest city owned is going to gain 3 mana and 3 food per tier of non-magic origin units killed in combat. This one is teetering between weak and good, because there are situations where it can be strong, but in my opinion, most of the time, those situations, although frequent in the case of the third trait, don't warrant this ability. As the game progresses, like as an early ability, it might be fine. It might prevent some deaths of your tier 1 units, maybe ease some fights, maybe prevent necromancers from interacting with corpses. In those situations, it can be good, not great, good. And then the final bonus, although it stacks up later as unit tiers get higher, I personally don't find that that economic bonus is anywhere near as good as some of the other ones. So to me, I kind of think I'm leaning toward Ritual Cannibals being in the weak tier. And moving on to Ruthless Raiders, I kind of agree for the same reasons. That although the bonuses from 3 gold and 3 daft per tier of unit killed can be useful, and you can get hundreds to thousands of gold from this, I'm not too sure that it is consistently good enough to compete with some of the other traits around. So once more, I'm going to personally put this one in the weak tier. Maybe if you take both of these together and just go on a murder spree out in combat, you'll start racking in all these resources, and I might be missing out on, but between the two of them, I just don't think that these are anywhere near as impactful as, say, something like Prolific Swarmers or Chosen Uniters. We'll move on now to the arcane traits. So Ancient Wise Ones, I think, is a pretty damn good one. Most people I've heard or seen agree. So what this is when you unlock a new tome, so another set of 4 or 5 spells, one skill in that tome is going to take a 60% reduction to its cost. You also start with 1 skill unlocked. So that 1 skill unlocked, that doesn't matter as much. It prevents you from taking Gifted Casters and Shadow Walkers, but that's kind of okay. We can come back to that, but that's okay. Essentially what this will do is it's going to fast track your tome knowledge in every stage of the game. I don't know, again, this one kind of teeters between great and good, because it's going to fast track your entrance to a new tier tome, usually. But the actual value of the knowledge it gives you, like the knowledge resource amount it gives you, I still don't think is comparable to some of the other great traits. So this is very, very good, and it might, maybe toward the end of the video, maybe I shuffle it over to great. But for now, although it is consistently good, I don't feel it is strong enough to warrant being considered great. And that might trigger a lot of people, because I know I've been reading that this is the tome to get, this is amazing, but a 60% knowledge reduction on 1 skill from that tome every time you get a tome, some of these traits are a lot stronger than that. I will leave it at the top of good. For now. Maybe my mind gets changed later, but mathematically, I'm a value player in most of the games I play, and this is consistent value, but I don't think it is enough value. And that goes to almost the rest of them that I've placed in the good tier. Move on now to Gifted Casters. And Gifted Casters gives you 10 combat casting and 10 world map casting points. That's pretty good, especially if you're a champion that you might not have as much. Now, combat spells cost 20% less mana to cast. You start with one combat spell unlocked. So those traits kind of work well for you throughout the game. I don't think this is great, though. I think this is firmly good, maybe, equal with Ancient Wise Ones. It's going to let you do a little bit more casting in combat and so on. The thing that I had an issue with, I was going to put this in great, but then I realized combat spells cost 20% less mana to cast. If that was 20% less mana and combat casting points, I think we'd be going somewhere. I think I would be super ecstatic to take this on either a champion or a wizard king. It's just 20% more combat spells, and that's kind of huge. But as the game progresses, and you tend to have a surplus of mana, that at least I tend to have a surplus of mana that I keep as a nest egg in case something goes awry. The mana cost of a spell is never something that's really concerned me. I've always been concerned about the combat cost, the combat casting cost, of a spell. That can actually determine whether I cast spell A or spell B. The mana costs, listen, I gotta win this battle. I'm not one of those, oh, this spell is inefficient, this spell is more efficient. I don't care. I need to win a battle, and if a spell does the thing that I need in order to win, I will cast it. But if that thing that I need to win prevents me from doing the other thing that I need to do to win, now we have a problem. And that would be almost always, in my gameplay at least, be limited to the combat casting points, which this does alleviate a little bit by giving you an additional 10. But that 10 does not scale. And toward the end, some combat casting spells consume a lot. So this is very good, but it is not great. We'll move now to mana channelers. So mana channelers are your summoning spells cost 50% less mana to cast, and your magic origin units have +1 rank. You start with an extra mana or magic origin unit. So it provides you an early boost in starting with an extra unit. I do like most of these mana origin units that are tier 1 or whatnot because they eventually evolve into a tier 3 version of themselves, and those tend to be very strong for the stage of the game you get them in. I think that is really cool. I think more units should have that because it's really cool and it is really fun when that happens and you kind of feel like you're training your Pokemon, and that is good. My issue is, once more, it might be a personal playstyle thing. I think this is weak because the mana cost to cast a summoning spell is not ultimately what concerns me, it is their upkeep. So if this had an additional effect saying, hey, we know it's 50% cheaper to cast a magic origin unit, but then it also said, okay, but now they're 20% cheaper, I think we'd be in business. Right now, I'm going to put this in weak because these abilities or these effects on their own, I don't see them as particularly strong or unique. And therefore, I will put this in weak. Moving down, we now have Adept Settlers. And Adept Settlers is very similar to Prolific Swarmers to me. It is something that gives you more cities, lets you play wider, gives you more resources, and it makes it cheaper to do so. So where Prolific Swarmers made it easier for your cities to get big, this one makes it easier for you to just have more cities. So by default, you get 1 city cap. Okay, that's good. Now instead of 3 cities, you get 4 cities, and it saves you essentially 200 Imperium points, scaling technically, because that does get more expensive, for another city. Because usually the 200 is good to pay, easily. The 500 starts getting a bit wishy-washy. But the 200 is good to pay, and I tend to do that. And I usually end the games with 4 cities as a result. Adept Settlers, though, instead of 4 cities, now you're at 5 cities. That is a 20% boost to everything at that stage in the game. Early on, obviously not. Early on, you can kind of ignore your city cap. However, founding cities cost 25% less Imperium. So this is kind of a double whammy on saving Imperium for your nation right now. That's really good so far. Newly founded cities gain +1 population. Okay, that's tempo. So now as you found your cities, they get better faster. That is really good. That by itself, those 3 traits already is kind of like, okay, Adept Settlers is a late game trait that is going to make your mid to late game stronger. Mostly your late game, because mid game is when you're founding these cities and they haven't really provided their value to you yet. But by late game, yes, you will feel you start to feel the effects of having more cities, having cheaper cities, all the Imperium you've been saving on the way. That would make it good. But then your capital city starts with +1 population. So that's not a powerful early game boost, and I think I've mentioned this already. I think it was Imperialists that gets it. Yeah, so that's not a powerful early game boost. But the fact of the matter is that this is a late game trait, and you're still getting an early game boost out of it. It's a consolation prize. But that's pretty good. So Adept Settlers definitely is going to be the great tier. We'll move now to Experienced Seafarers. And this one is quite firmly in the good tier. If you could take advantage of it, this is insanely powerful to me as a value player. This is strong because this is saying your fishery that already provides similar resources to everything else is going to provide 6 more resources. It doesn't sound like a lot. These are just +2s. It doesn't sound like a lot. But hear me out. If you go build a farm on land, you get +5 food. Okay, so that's a +5 on that province. This is giving you +6 just as a bonus to the yield that the fishery is already providing. So this is more than doubling the value of these coastal provinces. Now, the rest of it, it doesn't matter too much, honestly. Naval units costing less resources to recruit and maintain. I mean, okay. That's nice, I guess. Naval units have +2 rank. Okay. Basic seafaring. Okay, that to me is you're saving some Imperium, and I think it lets you use rivers as roads. No, that must be something different. Yeah, that must be a different one. So this is just kind of lets you move around water. It saves you some Imperium points that you may or may not have spent anyways. I don't tend to buy this, but I also tend to not play on sea maps. If you were forced to always play on sea maps, I might say that Experienced Seafarers is great. But since it is situationally very strong. But since it is situational, I'll say it is good. Fabled Hunters. I personally haven't used this because just by reading it, it seems unimpressive, uninspired, and frankly, it's an early game boost. It is a very, very early game focus boost. This is the kind of thing you would take alongside Adept Settlers, for example. Because Adept Settlers is such a late game trait, you might need to take something like Fabled Hunters to kind of offset that, because you're going to get more resources as you expand and beat up the indies, the independents. Your ranged units and your skirmishers start a little stronger, but your strategy might not even use those. And then you start with an extra ranged unit, so it's a little early game tempo. But ultimately, I don't think it scales as well as some of the other traits. And the only time I could see it being useful is to offset another late game trait. And that seems not worth your trait point. Not worth one of your 2 trait points. So I think this is firmly in the weak category. Talented Collectors. This one I thought initially was something really, really good. And that's why I have it unlocked already, as opposed to some of the other ones that I don't have unlocked. Because I, at the moment, did not really think of what a magic material was. I thought it was a magic material, like taking this trait, I thought it was per resource node. So I thought it was saying you're going to gain 5 to all the resources per resource node in your domain. And I was thinking, hey, I already do that. I already build my cities surrounded by resource nodes and try to extract as much value from the city placement as I can. That sounds wonderful. What this actually is, for the most part, is an early game boost to your resources, because you're going to start now with a magic material nearby. And when you take it over, it's going to give you all these bonuses. So it's what, +25? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So +30 overall resources to your city, which is pretty good. It's going to make that magic material really, really good. And then the magic material is also going to tend to provide a pretty good bonus. However, in the grand scheme of things, and compared to some other traits, these +5s that they're providing, they're adding a lot of value to magic materials, but how many magic materials are you really going to have laying around? That's very, very situational. And then even then, the bonus doesn't seem too strong compared to other bonuses that you could be getting. So it's not only inconsistent, but it's also fairly weak. And that takes it straight into the bad category. Again, I unlocked it quick because I thought it was per resource, in which case it would be so strong. But it is per magic material. Magic materials being like Archon's Blood or whatever helps you get these. I mean, maybe getting you close to getting these would help, but no. Anyways, let's move on to the Materium. So Great Builders. Great Builders is one that I firmly place into the very good category. Because it is consistently good, it kind of funnels you into a certain layout when making your cities, if that's a way, because now you really want to build those quarries. But I think Great Builders is very good. There is a situation in where you can kind of get screwed over by taking it, in which that there might not be a lot of quarry placements around you, but I still think this goes firmly in the great category. So what quarries you do get are going to yield an extra 2 gold. That is both an early and a late game boost, because at late game you're going to have a gazillion quarries. Early game, getting 7 resources per province is almost 50% better than getting 5. Right? 5 to 7? Makes sense. And quarries, anyways, honestly, in my opinion, you kind of want to build quarries early anyways because you want that production value. So you kind of already want to build these things, but now they're going to give you almost 50% more resources. That's really good. Now, your special province improvements cost 50% less production. The gold cost is going to be the same, but building those special province improvements are going to be cheaper. And that's pretty good. They can vary in which ones are good and which ones are bad, but getting them out faster is always good. Now we're going to go to the starting bonus, because so far these 2 bonuses, like, they're good, but they're not great. The starting bonus is that you start with a workshop, and the workshop can change depending on what culture you are. But starting with an extra 10 draft and 10 production income is an almost... I wish I had gone in and written exactly how much of these you start with. It's between 20 and 30, but that's almost a 50 to 30% boost to your starting production and draft on turn 1 to 5. And honestly, your workshop is pretty likely one of the first things you're going to build, because it's going to help you start producing the rest of your buildings and producing the units that you need to stay alive. Stone walls also will keep you alive, but in a perfect world, we're not going to use these. But it'll help keep you alive, and that's pretty important. Honestly, the stone walls are just kind of there as a consolation. You ideally never want to use your stone walls. But that's just me planning for victory and not planning for getting attacked. So that's Great Builders, leaving you in Great just because it gives you such an early game boost. Like, in terms of if you want an early game boost to take a late game trait, let's say you take Adept Settlers, do you want Fabled Hunters or do you want Great Builders? I mean, they synergize so great already. Why would you take Fabled Hunters again? Anyway, let's move on to Runesmiths. Runesmiths is another one that I really enjoy, and I think I would place it in the great tier because it can be consistently great throughout the game. Any unit enchantment research, so things like lighting your swords on fire or putting poison on your arrows, is going to cost 30% less knowledge to unlock. That's pretty good. Very comparable to Ancient Wise Ones, except it's more focused on something that, in my opinion, almost always, I will research on every tome, every unit enchantment that there is, because I like my units being strong. Maybe some of you guys don't, but I like my units being strong. So having this be cheaper is it is a lesser value but more focused version of Ancient Wise Ones. But wait, there's more. Unit enchantments cost 30% less upkeep. Once more, I like, personally, my opinion, my playstyle, I enjoy buffing up my units to the 9s. So that tends to get really expensive, and this making them cost less upkeep is pretty damn cool. So both of these two are already really good late game bonuses. But wait, there's more. Shield and polearm units start with +1 rank. That's okay, I guess. It's nothing to break the bank, but then you also start with an extra unit, a shield or a polearm unit. And we're back in action. So now this is a late game society trait, but it gives you early game tempo by making your shield and polearm units, who may or may not be the core of your roster, slightly better, and then it gives you a whole ass unit for free. Fantastic. We'll move down now to Wonder Architects. Wonder Architects, honestly, this might not be one of the stronger traits in the game, but I love it. This is very neat because Ancient Wonders do not require population in order to be annexed to a city. So as soon as you're able to, you can take the Ancient Wonder for free. Like, assuming you've cleared it out, of course. You get the Ancient Wonder for free. That's really good. Not just because you annex it to a city, but because you annex it to an outpost. So what this means to me is if I want to place an outpost next to an Ancient Wonder with the sole purpose of claiming that Ancient Wonder, that outpost also claims an additional province. So instead of each outpost claiming 2 provinces, an outpost by an Ancient Wonder will claim 3 provinces. Now, that might be situational. Maybe you don't find Ancient Wonders. Maybe you can't clear them. It is technically situational. But its bonus, to me, is so strong that we can definitely put this in the great category. And I've only just started talking about it. Cities gain 20% production per annexed Ancient Wonders. It's unlikely, but not impossible that you can annex more than one, especially because of your starting bonus. 1 nearby Ancient Wonder is cleared. There is a hell of a lot that can mean. It can give you an Ancient Wonder that is very good for the early game, that lets you recruit certain units that might be strong. It might fill up your banner call with good units. It might give you resources. Regardless of what it's going to do, is it's going to give you 5 Imperium points. It's going to give you an early, I think it's a research node, that is what you put on those, and it's going to be free. It's already cleared. This is just completely free to you. So it is a big infusion of resources that early on are hard to come by. And that is going to be your early game bonus. Late game is just anytime you want to put an outpost by an Ancient Wonder, hello, you get an additional province. It is a 33% boost to your outposts. I might be biased on this one. Definitely this is one that we can argue should go into the good category because it's situational. But having used it, it is so nice and so convenient. I think it is in the great category. And it is very gameplay changing, which is also very fun to me. And that is not something I've talked about with some of these other traits. But because of that fun value, I really have the personal bias to put this in great. We'll talk now about Powerful Evokers. Powerful Evokers is our first shadow trait, and it is okay. I don't think it is strong by any means. Not one bit. This definitely goes into the weak category. Battle Mage and support units have +1 rank. The only aspect of that which is very impactful is that some of the spirits that you summon, like a Magma Spirit or whatever, the lesser one, is technically a Battle Mage and should get +1 rank, right? So it's going to be quicker to transition it to its adult form that is big and large and scary and useful. That part is good. Battle Mage units and support units provide 5 combat casting points at the start of combat. Again, this is something that is it's very situational and requires you to play a certain way. I don't see this bonus except in really, let me take a step back. In traditional gameplay, that bonus is not terribly terribly strong. But what it can do is open up avenues for cheese. Now, I personally am not the cheese master. I am not good at finding cheese in games. But I definitely see that if you bring an 18 stack of Battle Mage and support units and increase your combat casting points by 90, and you're a Wizard King that already has a gazillion combat casting points, I could see the potential to do some really stupid shit. So for there, okay, maybe it shouldn't be weak, but again, this is my tier list and I'm kind of biased, so I want to put it in weak just because I don't see myself having fun doing these cheese strategies. For someone who does, definitely throw this in great, or maybe a solid good, because it might take you a while to get to the stage of the game where you can field 18 stack armies of support and battle mage units. And just in case, battle mage doesn't necessarily mean you don't have a front line. You could have tier 3 elementals as your front line, and they're fairly tanky. They're not iron walls, but they can be strong. And then you start with an extra battle mage or support unit, depending on what nation you're playing or what culture you're playing, my bad. That can be either good or bad. Sometimes you really don't you don't need that extra support unit, but an extra battle mage would be cool, and you didn't start with the right ones. That's kind of, I don't know, the more I see these start with this or that, I feel like you should get a choice. Maybe in single player get a choice, and then if you're in multiplayer, okay, fine, randomize it, who cares? But even then, I'm not sure. Let's move down to Scions of Evil. Scions of Evil is pretty cool. So you're going to gain 10 draft, and your empire gains 5 Imperium per level of evil alignment. Units are recruited with a +1 rank when you're at the maximum evil alignment. That's kind of trash, honestly. And you start with -10. Your shock and shield units start with +1 rank. You start with an extra shock or shield unit. So that's pretty good. Most of this is pretty good. This is kind of like an early game go fight people kind of deal. You're going to start this -10. Oh, jeez. Oh, jeez. This -10 alignment, it's really what's going to unlock the rest of your gameplay. It's going to give you your 10 draft and your 5 Imperium. And then you can triple that eventually by becoming very evil and pure evil. That might take you some time. When you're at pure evil, you'll gain a +1 rank. And your shock and shield units get +1 rank, so technically you can get +2 rank to your shock and shield units, which is cool. Especially maybe you can combine it with other factors to give them a big rank. Then you start with an extra shock or shield unit. My issue with this one is that these bonuses are good, but they're not great. This is very similar to Devotees of Good, but obviously it's more like combat and war focus. So for the same reason, I'm just going to kind of leave this in the good category because it's consistent, but it doesn't really scale amazingly, and it's not the most powerful bonuses. We'll move down to Shadow Walkers. Your provinces have an additional range, or vision range. Your scouts have universal camouflage. Outposts start with the Watchtower upgrade built. Wayfinder enchantment is already active and costs no upkeep, and you start with an extra scout unit. This is interesting. I know one thing you could do with this, but I'm not sure about the rest. Because these are kind of bonuses that are nice to have, but do you really want one of your 2 society traits being this? Like, do you want this, or do you want Prolific Swarmers? Prolific Swarmers, any day. Starting with an extra scout unit is kind of okay in the sense that I tend to recruit an additional scout unit at the beginning, so I guess it saves me that, and I could go straight to a military unit. But at that point, wouldn't it have been better if I started with the military unit that can start helping me fight independence and expand and do whatever? So it's kind of there. The Wayfinder enchantment makes your scouts faster and saves you, it's not going to pop up in your tomes for you to research, which is cool, I guess. Outpost starting with the Watchtower upgrade built. I honestly don't build the Watchtower often, so I guess that's nice. It saves me money I would not have spent. And your cities and provinces getting 2 vision range. I mean, sure. But universal camouflage on your scouts is pretty cool if you are the barbarians. if you're barbarian culture, you can use this in either single player or multiplayer, although it might piss off some AI in single player. You can use this to move your scout around to an unexpected location on the map. No one will know you're doing this. You drop an outpost, and then you turn that outpost into a city, and now you have a city in an unexpected area on the map that can do things. It can make a surprise attack on your opponent when they're least expecting it. It can access resources you might not otherwise have had. If you don't link up to it eventually, it might get taken over. But I think the idea of being able to sneak behind your enemy and make an outpost and then suddenly attack them from behind with a large army, in theory that sounds good, but this doesn't seem powerful to me. So it's kind of situational, and then it's not strong, so it's going straight into weak. Now, I was in the process of making a Toad Nation for one of the story realms. I'm going to have to ditch what little I've done, because I don't have the other stuff unlocked. So let's go to the Pantheon screen real quick. And when we go to the Pantheon screen, we're going to see the next traits. Where are they? We have Silver-Tongued. So Silver-Tongued is pronouncement cost 50% less. So like when you say someone is your rival, someone is your friend. So that's cool. Trade deals with free cities cost you 100% resources. Or minus 100% resources. That is strong. That is ridiculously strong. That is very strong. That can be here alone and be good. Maybe great. Just that by itself is ridiculously strong in the late game. Early game, this provides you nothing. You're not going to pronounce anything early game. You're not going to have trade cities to talk to early game. But that is very strong. Now, starting with an extra scout unit, and it's going to be micro-intensive, because I think you have to renew your trades until the game lets you kind of start your trades over again, or your trades over again automatically. Like say, hey, perpetually trade this nation or this free city food for mana or whatever the hell. Until that happens, it might be a little bit more micro-intensive, but it is a very strong ability. Starting with an extra scout unit, again, same thing as, was it the Shadow Walkers? It's nice, but okay. And then Diplomatic Focus, same thing as I think with Chosen Uniters. It's just kind of saving you some Imperium. So early game, this does nothing. This is like a pure greed late game trait. It is very strong. I might want to say it's great, just because it's so situational. But in terms of value, because this can save you a lot of resources. I haven't used it yet. I haven't unlocked it. So this is theory. Maybe I'm wrong and this belongs in good. Maybe it's not taking into effect until late game. And the resources it gives you are just in general not as impactful. And I end up being completely wrong and this should go in good or even weak. But for face value of what I am reading, trade deals with free cities costing you less resources sounds amazing. Especially, I like making a lot of vassals. Again, I've mentioned this before, I tend to stay at 3 to 4 cities. I make a hell of a lot of vassals, and they give me a hell of a lot of income before I even start trading with them. This is very good. Let's see, the other one, I think we have Chosen Destroyers. Chosen Destroyers is so cool. So cool. It is so cool. So raising cities grants you a permanent 40 gold, 20 mana, and 20 knowledge income. You cannot obtain new cities. Conquered cities can only be raised. This goes against everything else I've been talking about. Oh, and you suffer. Everyone hates your ass. This is so cool. I don't know if that bonus is good enough to warrant taking it, to warrant the penalties of taking it, unless you cheese this. Like in multiplayer, I don't see this working at all. In single player, you can probably cheese the AI, where you go and raise a city and they rebuild it and you raise it again and they rebuild it and you raise it again. And doing that, obviously the potential for this to be good is infinite. But in traditional gameplay, without cheese, I don't think this is good. This is definitely a challenge. Playing a game with Chosen Destroyers sounds so fun. So maybe mechanically, it is not amazing. But in terms of fun, I want to put it in good. But honestly, I gotta be true to you guys and give you guys good information. This has to go in weak. Just because the penalty of not being able to have new cities is not offset by raising cities. Especially because, this locks you into the victory type of murder everybody. Because with only one city, you cannot do the magic victory and you cannot do the expansion victory. You are forced to hunt down and kill every single goateer on the map. Because you cannot make more than one city. Yeah. I want to put this in good because it sounds so fun to play this game, and it will definitely show up on my channel one day once I've unlocked it. But for now, yeah, this is definitely weak. Maybe if they double, just straight up double or triple. No, triple might be too strong. Maybe. Vastly increase the resources this provides and make it give you draft. Oh man, if they or even leave it at the resources it has, but then give you 20 to 40 draft. And we will be in business. We will be in business. That will make you a hilariously strong snowball. That draft income, you might end up hating it if you're ever at peace, which is impossible, but if you're ever not attacking things, because you'll be able to outproduce so many units, you won't be able to pay for them. That would be cool. You are forced. It's very similar to the Chaos Dwarves in Warhammer 3. You will be forced to constantly expand and constantly fight just to pay your troops. That sounds like such a fun game. It's just this is not very strong as it is right now. I think there's one more I am missing. No, there's two more I'm missing. Oh, no, there's three more. I completely forgot about this one. So we have Bannerlords. Bannerlords, Rally of Lieges occurs twice as often. Rally of Lieges being when all your vassals give you units. In the ultra late game, this can be good and save you a lot of gold, even though it might give you terrible armies. Starting with the nearest free city revealed and gain 25 allegiance with them. Technically there is like your early game bonus, but it's not very strong. Not one bit. Maybe start with the nearest free city revealed and vassalized. That'll be interesting. I don't know where that land on the strong weak scale. It would definitely be an interesting one. Rally of the Lieges occurring twice as often. While good in the late game where you want this to happen, you could probably just buy Rally of the Lieges straight out every time. Like reducing the time of it or something. No. I don't think Bannerlords is for me. I don't think Bannerlords is for me. This I'm putting into the weak category. And here is Perfectionist Artisans. Perfectionist Artisans, city structures cost 100% more production, but grant 1 city stability and plus 5 gold, in addition to their normal effects. This sounds good. Especially because it's not 100% more production and gold. This is 100% more production only, and then it gives you gold per turn. That is pretty cool. Unit, or tier 3 units, tier 3 units, that's a weird one. Tier 3 units have +1 rank. Depending on what kind of gameplay you're looking for, that can be good or bad. Or maybe you're playing like Prolific Swarmers, or you want to play tier 1 unit spam. So, I mean, okay. And +1 rank, I mean, it's not super impactful. Your city cap is decreased by 2. You can only have 1 city to start with. I'm surprised that this is not incompatible with Adept Settlers. They seem kind of they seem like against each other, but you can take both at once. And that might kind of offset the -2 city cap. And then start with an extra tier unit, tier 3 unit. That can be very strong. Imagine starting with a Berserker if you're the Barbarians. That is powerful. That is very powerful. It can be very powerful. It's situationally powerful. The +5 gold per building that you build, though, That is strong. That is very strong. Even if they cost 100% more production, that's okay. That's okay. You just build quarries everywhere. You take great builders and put quarries everywhere. Like this is very good, but unfortunately, that's all it is. It is very good. It is not great. That penalty is harsh. It's going to prevent you to do a lot of good things. I mean, you can still make vassals, but that is still a harsh penalty for a very good trait. So I'm going to leave this in good. It could potentially be broken, as that is a lot of gold. You will build a lot of buildings, even with this 100% more production cost. You will build cheap buildings just to get the gold, especially once they've been boosted. It just, I wouldn't say it's great. Even with the tier 3 unit spawn, even with everything, it's almost there, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe if I play with this, I can just be amazed at how wrong I was and how great this is, but for now I will leave this in good. And we have one more up top here, which is Mana Addicts, and this is a cool one. This is a very cool one. So battle mage and support units have +1 rank, and you start with an extra one. So from talking about powerful evokers, we already mentioned that. I like this. This is cool. It helps your Pokemon level up when they're battle mages. It can be neat. An extra battle mage or a support unit, I mean, either or, it's very dependent on your nation on whether that is good or bad. And then all units you recruit, humans you summon, humans you find in a cage in the middle of the desert, all units gain mana addicted. This is interesting. So when a combat spell is cast, they gain lifesteal that turn. So when they hit, they gain 10. If it is a repeating attack, they gain 5 per hit. That is good. They suffer 5 morale at the end of the turn if no combat spell was cast this turn. So it's hard for me to suggest this as this hyper amazingly amazing thing. You can say your multi-attack units are getting 15 hit points per turn, right? But there are a lot of situations in the game where multi-hits like that are not, or rather just say 15 hit points per turn. There is a stage in the game where that is not a lot, especially if you have shock units where you're getting 10 per turn. And -5 morale is bad. It is very bad. Your units will consistently get worse with -5 morale. If they had an offset of this, when you cast a combat spell, add 10 morale until you are neutral morale, we might be talking. But as it is, I'm going to throw this straight into weak. It might get boosted to good just because it sounds fun to play this style, but ultimately I do not like this, and I do not think that this mana addicted trait is strong enough to warrant it. And once more, as with all these other unlockable traits, I could be very wrong. Playing with it could change my mind and see how, wow, this is so amazing. But as it stands, I think that this trait, again, is so detrimental for not the greatest bonus. And morale later in the game is very important, because once you start having these big fights, morale is going to cause a lot of your army to rout, especially if you're playing against a dark player that has like joy siphoners or something that's going to just devastate your morale across the board as they fight you, and other morale lowering spells. I just think that the weakness that this gives you is definitely not offset by that bonus. Okay, so I think at this point I've hit all of the society traits. And once more, I just want to reiterate, these are my opinions. I could be wrong. But at least for now, that's what I'm thinking would be a healthy tier list for the society traits. At least for this version of Age of Wonders. Maybe in future versions, we're going to have some change, and some will get buffed, some will get nerfed. But with that, I'll leave you next time, and I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed playing Age of Wonders. It is a great game, and I'll see you guys next time.